Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a story that starts with a sparkling ring and ends with something far more valuable, self-respect. Picture this. You're on one knee, heart pounding, in front of the woman you thought was your forever. The ring you picked took months of saving, some tough trade-offs, and a lot of late-night doubts about the size and style. But you did it, and when you opened the box, her face lit up. Though, if you really replay it, there was a flicker, a pause. Like she was calculating something. You ignore it. Of course you do. Love makes you blind in the most beautiful and reckless ways. She says yes. You laugh. You hold her tight. Everything feels cinematic. A few weeks later, you're curled up on the couch, talking wedding venues and honeymoon dreams. Then the topic of finances creeps in. She casually mentions a prenup. Not unusual, you think. Modern times, modern minds. But it's the way she says it. Light and clipped, like she's ordering dry cleaning. That's when you catch that strange smile again. It's not joy, it's control. You laugh it off, because that's what you do. Historians still argue whether ancient Roman dowries were truly about love or power. But sitting beside her in that moment, you start leaning toward the power theory. Oddly enough, did you know Egyptian nobility in 1500 BC often arranged marriages solely to protect land rights? Yeah, suddenly that weird fact hits a little too close to home. So before you even see a lawyer or read a single clause, something in you, quiet and intuitive, starts to pull away. You don't leave. Not yet. But for the first time, you wonder, what am I really marrying into? You try to shake it off. You tell yourself she's just being practical, that maybe this is what adulthood looks like. Talks about boundaries and financial clarity. But deep down, you know what you felt. It wasn't a conversation, it was a declaration. A few days later, you're sitting across from her at her favorite brunch spot. Sunlight catching in her curls, laughter all around you. That's when she says it. Casually, like she's reading a menu. You can't touch my money. It's all mine. There's no softness, no humor, just steel behind her eyes. You blink, thinking maybe she's joking. But no, she means it. Your smile falters for a second, but you recover. You always recover. That's what you've learned to do in this relationship. You nod, let the moment pass. But inside, something is shifting. It's like hearing a crack in your favorite mug. Not enough to throw it out, but enough that every sip from now on will feel off. That single sentence, delivered so effortlessly, echoes louder than any argument you've ever had. You remember reading once that in 16th century Venice, there were public tribunals for marriage disputes, where spouses would air grievances about everything, from infidelity to unpaid dowries. Today, we just do it over Eggs Benedict and overpriced coffee. Historians still debate whether women in medieval England had real financial independence or were just figureheads for their husbands' assets. But sitting across from her, you know one thing for certain. This isn't about equality. It's about possession. You smile. You ask for the check. And in that moment, you make a silent vow. Not to fight her, not to prove your worth, but to protect the one thing she clearly doesn't value, your dignity. That night, you can't sleep. You're staring at the ceiling, tracing the swirl patterns in the plaster, like they might reveal some secret answer. The words replay. You can't touch my money. Not once, but again and again, like a needle caught in a groove. And the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so void of partnership, clings to your skin like cold sweat. The next morning, you take a walk. You don't tell her where you're going. It's not that you're hiding anything. It's that you finally want something that's yours. Even just this walk. You wander into a quiet bookstore downtown, one you haven't been in since college. The smell of old paper, of spines long forgotten, greets you like an old friend. You find yourself in the law section. Not because you plan to, but because something deeper, quieter, is guiding you. You pull out a dusty copy of Prenuptial Agreements, a Practical Guide. Flipping through it, your eyes catch a case study about a couple where the prenup turned into a declaration of war instead of a foundation for peace. You chuckle bitterly. Some things never change. Odd detail? In ancient Mesopotamia, prenuptial-like contracts were etched in clay tablets, literal stone promises. Some of those tablets still exist. Imagine your relationship being that permanent and that fragile. Historians still argue whether those early contracts were about love, power, or just survival. But right now, for you, it's clearly not about love. You close the book and stand there for a moment. Not angry, not even heartbroken. Just awake, like you finally rubbed the fog from the mirror and saw your reflection, not the version she molded, but the one you forgot. And in that quiet awakening, something beautiful stirs. Resolve. You come back home to the sound of her laughter echoing down the hallway. She's on the phone, talking to someone. Her sister, maybe. You pause outside the doorway just long enough to hear her say, "He's too soft to walk away. He'll sign it." He always caves. Something inside you doesn't break. It aligns. Not like a tree snapping in the wind, but like a train finally clicking onto the right track. You walk past the doorway without saying a word. She doesn't even notice. You sit down at the kitchen table and lay the prenup in front of you. You take out a pen. For a second, you almost sign it, just to make things easier. But then, in a move so calm it feels foreign, you set the pen down and write a note instead. "I thought we were building a life. You're building a vault. I'm not stepping inside." You leave it there, on top of the contract. There's this moment, a weirdly serene moment, when you're packing your bag. One hoodie, a few shirts, your passport, for no real reason. There's a stillness in the air, almost sacred, like your soul is quietly high-fiving itself. You remember reading once that the Roman Emperor Augustus left his wife a will that divided nothing equally. Historians still argue if it was love lost or power play. The messy mix of both? Maybe you walk out the door without slamming it. Because silence right now feels stronger than noise. And as the door clicks behind you, there's no movie score crescendo. Just the hum of traffic, the weight of your keys in your pocket, and the lightness in your chest that can only come from finally choosing yourself. You find a quiet motel on the edge of town. It's not glamorous. Peeling wallpaper, humming AC unit, but it offers something you haven't felt in months. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from no longer waiting for someone to love you the way you deserve. That night, you lie on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling, your mind drifting between memories and realizations. You think back to the day you proposed, how she cried, how you believed every tear was joy. But maybe those tears were something else entirely. Regret? Control? Historians still argue whether Marie Antoinette ever truly said, "Let them eat cake." Some say it was propaganda. Others say it captured her arrogance perfectly. You wonder which version of your fiancé people would believe, if they only saw the highlight reel. You try not to spiral, but the memories keep coming. Like the time you bought her that necklace with your bonus. She smiled and said, "Cute, but next time, just give me the cash." You laughed it off. Of course you did. You were always quick to laugh things off. But now, in this unfamiliar room with nothing but your bag and a half-full vending machine water, you're no longer laughing. You're grieving. Not just the woman, but the version of yourself who thought love meant enduring, adapting, sacrificing. You start to realize that walking out wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of rebirth. And like all rebirths, it's messy and uncomfortable, but it's honest. Outside, the wind rattles the windows. You pull the thin blanket up to your chin and close your eyes. Tomorrow, you'll figure out what comes next. Tonight, you just need to survive the quiet. Morning comes with a soft gray light spilling through the faded curtains. You wake up groggy, your back aching from the lumpy mattress, but there's something unfamiliar in your chest, space. It's not peace. Not yet. But it's the absence of her voice drilling into your confidence, the absence of feeling like you owe someone your dignity. You check your phone. A dozen missed calls. 5 from her, the rest from mutual friends. No messages, just calls. No one wants to put anything in writing, not when truth might one day be replayed. You chuckle bitterly. "You can't touch my money," she'd said, like you'd ever wanted it. You remember her clutching her purse tighter when you reached for the prenup. That moment, burned into your memory. She was protecting something she never shared. A fortune? A safety net? Or maybe just her illusion of control. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra took her own life or was executed by Roman orders. Either way, her legend remains because of the power she held, and how quickly it crumbled. You think of your fiancée and her obsession with image, status, power, How she weaponized money the way some use words. You spend the day in a quiet cafe staring into your black coffee like it might offer direction. You write a few things down. Your name, the date, and one line that hits harder than expected. I walked away not to hurt her, but to save me. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes, smiles gently. You wonder if she sees it in your face. The broken engagement. The shaken confidence. Maybe she's seen it before. You tip her extra and leave. You're not ready to go home yet. But for the first time, you're not afraid to be alone. You rent a quiet place just outside the city, a small cabin tucked beneath towering pines and wrapped in the kind of silence that feels earned. There's no Wi-Fi, barely any cell signal. Just the wind, the creaking of old wood, and your thoughts, raw and heavy like uncut stone. Out here, there's no need to explain anything to anyone. The neighbors are trees and squirrels, and none of them care why you left the prenup meeting. They don't ask why you gave up a wedding. You begin cooking simple meals again, reading old books with yellowed pages, and journaling like your life depends on it. Because, in a way, it does. You recall that in the Middle Ages, scribes would grind precious gemstones into ink. Lapis lazuli for blue, malachite for green. Imagine valuing words so much that you'd spill crushed treasure just to write them. You envy that purpose, you chase it. One evening, while scribbling thoughts onto the margins of a novel, you write, "Respect should never come with terms and conditions." And there it is, your clarity. The prenup wasn't about money. It was about her drawing a line in the sand, daring you to cross it while knowing she never intended to meet you halfway. Historians still debate the motivations behind Napoleon's retreat from Moscow. Was it weather, starvation, or simply pride gone too far? You think of your own retreat, not in shame but in survival. You weren't fleeing. You were reclaiming your breath. Your phone rings. Her name again. You let it buzz in your hand, then go still. You watch the sunset dip behind the trees, and for once, your heart doesn't clench. You're still healing. But now, you know where the wound is. A week passes. Then another. Each morning, the weight on your chest lifts a little. You still flinch when your phone rings, and sometimes her voice echoes in your dreams, twisted through anger and fear. But more often now, you wake with a strange companion, peace. You finally answer one of her calls. Her voice is trembling. You just walked out like I meant nothing. You pause, not out of hesitation, but to choose words that don't wound. "No," you say softly. "I walked out because you made it clear what I meant to you." She insists she didn't mean what she said, that it was just nerves, that every couple fights about money. But it wasn't about fighting. It was about what she revealed when she thought she had the upper hand. You think of the ancient Roman practice of damnatio memoriae, erasing someone's name from every monument, painting, and scroll after they'd been disgraced. Brutal, sure. But a part of you understands it. Some betrayals feel like they rewrite your entire story, and the only way to heal is to start a new scroll entirely. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra died by snakebite or poison, you say, half to her, half to yourself. Either way, it wasn't the method that mattered. It was the moment she took control of her own ending. She doesn't get it. You don't expect her to. You tell her you don't hate her. That's the truth. Hate is too heavy. But you don't love her either. Not in the way love's supposed to feel when it's healthy and free. The silence on the other end is long. Then the call ends. You don't cry. You don't shake. You just sit there, letting the stillness return. You start living differently now. Not drastically, not the kind of "I'm selling everything and moving to Bali" type of reinvention, but quieter shifts. You cook for yourself more often, and not just pasta or eggs. Actual meals. You go on long walks without needing a destination. You stop checking her social media. That last one takes effort. One day, you find the prenup draft still sitting on your email, unopened since the day you walked out. You hover over it. Part of you wants to read it, to see how little space you occupied in her financial future. But the better part of you, the healed, steady, wiser version, deletes it without opening it. You remember learning about the Code of Hammurabi in school, one of the oldest recorded legal systems, etched into a black stone stele. It famously included the phrase, "an eye for an eye," But scholars still debate whether it was meant literally or as a symbolic call for proportionate justice. That memory makes you smile. If this were ancient Babylon, you could have demanded compensation, taken her to a tribunal, made a show of her disrespect. But you're not interested in vengeance. You chose proportion, and your proportion was peace. You donate the expensive wine glasses she picked out. You return the suit you bought for the wedding. You finally tell your mom what happened. She just hugs you, wordless, knowing full well that some lessons can't be intercepted, only endured. It turns out walking away isn't a sign of weakness. It's a quiet revolution. Now, months have passed. You wake up one morning and the heaviness you carried is lighter, almost gone. You catch yourself laughing at a joke on the radio without a shadow in your mind. The world doesn't feel like a courtroom anymore. You start rebuilding, not with someone else, but with yourself. You reconnect with old friends you'd neglected, dive into hobbies you shelved, and even take a class that's completely unrelated to your work. Historians still argue whether personal reinvention after heartbreak is a cultural trend or an innate human survival instinct. But here you are, living proof. One curious fact you pick up along the way: in Victorian England, there was a social expectation that a betrayed partner should bear the burden silently, without public complaint. Oddly, this gave rise to coded messages in literature and art, secret cries for liberation. You chuckle because your own story felt like a modern-day Morse code, a signal sent in silence. At night, when the world quiets, you remember the moment your fiancée said, "You can't touch my money. It's all mine." You no longer feel the sting, but a sense of clarity. What belonged to her never needed your touch. You finally understand. Your worth wasn't measured by her approval or her wealth, but by your courage to walk away. So if you're listening and carrying a similar pain, maybe this story is for you, to remind you that sometimes the best answer is not a fight, but a quiet exit. And that, in itself, is a victory. Softer, slower tone. Now breathe deep. Let the tension melt away like morning mist. You are more than any challenge you face. And tomorrow is untouched, ready for you to write new pages.